Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. A commoner is given one chance to survive. He tries to fight for his life, but he is just mocked for using his pitiful magic. In this world, lineage, talent, and diligence are the most important things to be a mage. Unfortunately for our protagonist, no amount of diligence can make up for a lack of talent. The guy in charge tells him that magic will never smile upon him, and he uses real magic to eliminate the poor guy. As his body gets roasted, our protagonist loves magic so much that he calls the spell used to end his life magnificent. He admires the magic that can be used by a noble, and he calls it beautiful. His one wish would be to have learned more about magic, even if he couldn't use it effectively. The poor magic lover dies, but wakes up soon after. He finds that he is surrounded by giants, and tries to defend himself with the fireball, but his hands are tiny. Surprisingly, his fireball attack works. Outside, a huge celebration is held, as it is announced that the Salem Kingdom's 7th prince has been born. Our protagonist has been reborn as Prince Lloyd, and everyone is in shock when they see how much damage the little baby's fireball did. Years later, Floyd has grown up a bit, and he hides from his maids. He is asked to go on a raid, but our boy is too busy trying to escape from these maids. The knights decide to just let him be, since unfortunately for Lloyd, he is much younger than his brothers, so that puts him out of contention for the crown. One of the knights doesn't think that gaining the kid's favor would be worth the effort, but the other knight explains just how wrong he is. Floyd is amazing since he could speak shortly after birth. He was reading spell books instead of picture books. Also, like a true gentleman, Lloyd refused to drink milk from the source. Most importantly though, this guy thinks that Lloyd might be the reincarnation of the great mage known as William Bardot. William is known as the father of sorcery, so this just sounds ridiculous. Lloyd confirms that he was reborn, but he was actually just a commoner in his past life. He has no clue why he was reborn, or why he was so lucky to become a privileged 7th son of a royal family. Floyd doesn't actually care about standing or glory, and he's just following the same philosophy he had in his past life. Finding out how much awesome magic can be discovered in the world is all Floyd cares about. His new life comes with a huge library for the little nerd to enjoy, but Sylpha the maid stops him. The two immediately start sparring, but Lloyd doubts that he needs to learn the way of the sword because he has no shot at the throne anyway. Sylpha is quick to point out that there is more to life than royal succession. She was put in charge of Lloyd's education 3 years ago, and it has become her life purpose to teach Lloyd everything he needs to know, and that includes sword fighting. Lloyd realizes that the practice won't end unless he puts on a good showing, so Floyd attacks with more force. Sylpha is pleased to see that he's getting stronger every day, but Lloyd thinks about how she always holds back. Floyd is a magical genius, as he reveals to us that he's using control type magic to trace all of Sylpha's moves. From her point of view, she's pretty much just fighting a mirror image of herself. The mischievous little nerd thinks about how he's really just cheating, so he can go back to reading. The two continue fighting for now, and Lloyd acknowledges that Sylpha has him beat in strength, stamina, and height. He is able to copy her techniques with magic, but those other things put him at a disadvantage, and usually he loses. Lloyd decides that this is the perfect time to use today's experiment. He will use the difference in their physical abilities and cheat just enough to compensate. Lloyd uses a physical enhancement and levitation spell on himself. The difference is noticeable, and Lloyd uses a combination of physical attacks and magic to fight more evenly now. The fighting intensifies, but Lloyd is a pretty confident kid. He has been fighting Sylpha as her mirror image perfectly, so he is sure that he can win if he makes one different move. Floyd releases his trace spell and surprises Sylpha with an unexpected move. He apologizes for having to end the fight, but thinks about how he has to get back to reading. Surprisingly, Sylpha blocks the attack, and what's even more shocking is that she knows he was cheating. She wipes the kid out and points out that the difference in his reach was too noticeable. He used levitation to make up for their difference in height, and he even grew his wooden sword. Her anger turns into admiration, and she is astounded to see that he could use 2 spells at once, as even the court's magicians find that to be really difficult. In reality, Lloyd was using 4 spells, as he thinks about how she didn't notice the physical enhancement and control magic. Her brain would probably explode if she found out that he could use 4 spells at once, so he decides to keep that a secret. Afterwards, Lloyd is forced to take a bath, even though all he wants to do is read. The maids warn him about spending too much time in the library because the Forbidden Library's demon will appear to eat him alive. A long time ago, Salem was nearly destroyed. After the sacrifice of countless mages, the demon behind the attack was sealed away in a book, and its name is Grimoire. Sylpha is sure that Lloyd wouldn't be afraid of something like that, but he is trembling in fear. The girls argue about who will get to sleep with the scared kid, but Lloyd uses this opportunity to get away. It turns out that Lloyd isn't afraid of the demon, he is just excited to find this forbidden library that's somewhere in the castle's basement. That night, Lloyd uses wind magic to reflect the light around him, and he makes himself invisible. One guard tells the other to stay on his toes, since there is magic in the forbidden library that could shake the entire kingdom, not to mention that the sealed demon is also inside. This all sounds perfect to our adventurous protagonist, so he makes his way into the basement. The dumb guards are sure that no one can get past them, but even if someone did, 10 mages cast their most powerful magic sealing spells on the entrance to create an unbreakable barrier. This is nothing for our boy though, so he easily breaks the barrier and is amazed by the forbidden library. Lloyd takes a peek at some of the books, but Grimoire reveals himself almost immediately. Lloyd introduces himself, so Grimoire wonders if the kid could be nice and break the seal. The seal has degraded over the years, so it's only a matter of time before it breaks anyway. Grimoire offers to give him endless amounts of gold, but he is shocked when Lloyd is able to tell that he was just using poor imitation magic. Grimoire is shocked by the kid's composure, as Lloyd explains that this kingdom is where he studies magic, so he can't let some dangerous demon destroy it. Grimoire points out that he doesn't hold any grudges to the people in this day and age, but Lloyd doesn't believe him. Grimoire makes another attempt to convince Lloyd and offers to teach him some ancient magic, stuff that's been lost for hundreds of years. Grimoire is really speaking Lloyd's language now, as the kid gets really interested. Grimoire can tell that Lloyd has a lot of talent, and this makes Lloyd remember how he was told that magic would never smile upon him. Lloyd declares that he now has a more privileged body than a commoner, but Grimoire just wonders who talks this way about themselves. Lloyd lifts the seal and prepares to learn some ancient magic. The devious Grimoire just attacks him with an insanely powerful spell, and he wonders if this is enough of a lesson for Lloyd. With Lloyd eliminated, Grimoire wonders what his next move should be, but he is shocked when he realizes that Lloyd is still alive. He isn't just alive though. Lloyd is amazed by the unique attack, and he hopes that Grimoire can show him some more. Grimoire attacks furiously, but nothing he does can break the barrier. Grimoire is losing his mind to anger, but our boy Lloyd is super calm, and he uses his barrier to analyze all of Grimoire's attacks. This kid just can't help himself, as he wants to feel the attack, even at the risk of dying again. Grimoire is then absolutely stunned when Lloyd allows the magic to surround his finger. It's incredibly painful, but the magic-obsessed Lloyd can still admire its beauty. Lloyd asks for more, so the enraged Grimoire uses some time to summon an even more powerful spell. Synchronizing 2 incantations for a spell at once is generally impossible, and it's a special type of casting, only usable by a demon capable of having 2 mouths. Grimoire is screaming his brains out to unleash the most powerful attack he can muster, but our boy Lloyd is just analyzing the attack. Grimoire is shocked when his most powerful magic couldn't even scratch the barrier, and Lloyd admires how much effort it must have taken to get so powerful. Grimoire decides to run away from this crazy kid, but he's stunned to see that Lloyd put up another barrier. Grimoire assumes that he created it to keep him from running, but Lloyd reveals that he made a mistake a long time ago, so he made sure to be more cautious about everything moving forward. Grimoire prepares to attack again, but Lloyd is done analyzing his attacks. Lloyd powers up a powerful spell of his own, and demands that Grimoire show him what he can do on defense. Lloyd unleashes a massive fire attack, and Grimoire wonders where all this mana is coming from. It's too late though, as Lloyd's attack absolutely fries the demon. Lloyd points out that he didn't block the attack, but the demon just wonders who this crazy powerful kid is. Grimoire then bears witness as Lloyd restores the entire room after it had been blown to bits. Grimoire has never met such an amazing mage before, so he has started calling the kid Master Lloyd. Lloyd is amazed that Grimoire survived his attack, and this just makes a little psychopath curious about how much Grimoire will be able to survive. Grimoire doesn't want to feel the endless pain he would go through while Lloyd tests him, so he pledges himself to the kid. He offers to serve as his familiar, so Lloyd agrees. To not be found out, Grimoire transforms into the cutest animal he can, but he thinks about what he's really doing. He's using this cute exterior in the hopes that Lloyd will eventually let his guard down so he can get the drop on him. Lloyd tells the demon to get in his pocket, but Grimoire thinks about how that's a foolish decision. It works for him though, since if he gets that close to Lloyd, Grimoire is sure that he'll be able to control his mind and take over his body. Grimoire hops on, but he is stunned when he feels Lloyd's mana. Grimoire can't understand how it can be so dense, and he realizes that he won't be able to control a single finger on this monster. Grimoire doesn't think Lloyd is human, and he trembles in fear. Lloyd wonders if he's just cold, and Grimoire completely changes his tune to tell Lloyd that he can just call him Grim. Grimoire decides to be obedient for the time being, and Lloyd happily runs off to start doing some reading. Sometime later, we watch as the noble prepares for his day and makes his way through the mansion. In the library, Grim warns Lloyd that someone is approaching. Lloyd tells him to hide, and we learn that this noble is Prince Albert. Albert gives a demonstration of his power and amazes everyone when he's able to hit a target perfectly with his magic. Albert is the second prince of the Salem Kingdom. He excels at everything so much that everyone believes he will be the one chosen to be the next king. Albert has permission to access facilities like this one, and sometimes he invites Lloyd to come along. Lloyd is not able to use much of his magic in the castle, so he appreciates it when Albert invites him to the range. Lloyd is up next to give a demonstration, but he's not interested in the throne. Therefore, he does not need to impress anyone. Besides that, if he showed his true power, he would be forced to get involved in the power struggle between princes. Lloyd hates that idea since all he wants to do is research sorcery and peace. Grim wonders what he will do about the demonstration, so Lloyd explains that he will simply make his fireball curve so that they only graze the targets. Lloyd says it so simply, but Grim thinks that takes even more skill than just hitting the targets. Lloyd fires away and just barely grazes each one. Spectators are disappointed about it, but Grim thinks about how they should have realized how impossibly difficult it is to control magic so accurately. The magic-loving Lloyd doesn't pay them any attention, and just thinks about how he could improve his technique even more. Albert seems like he might know something, but he doesn't mention anything, and just says that Lloyd can stay while he takes a break. Lloyd couldn't be any happier, as there are so many things he wants to try. Lloyd wants to start by trying the dual incantation that Grim did, but Grim frantically tells him that it's impossible. That is an ability unique to demons that can form extra mouths. Lloyd thinks that he might have a solution though. He surprises himself when his idea works, but Grim is shocked and points out that no sane person would ever try incorporating a demon into their own body. Well, that's exactly what Lloyd did, so he tells Grim to try and cast an infernal fireball. Grim declares that this will be a piece of cake for a demon of his caliber, but he freaks out when things don't go the way he planned. Grim is terrified and wonders what Lloyd did. Lloyd explains that it was just a spell stack, a technique for compressing incantations. By reciting several incantations at once, Lloyd is able to shorten the time to cast a spell. Lloyd has taken this to an extreme level, as he casually says that he was just reciting about 100 spells in each line of the incantation. Grim is stunned at how casual he is being, and points out that even as a powerful demon, he can only stack 2 or 3 lines at once. Lloyd does his next test, and finds that he can now talk out of both mouths. Grim panics as he fears that Lloyd is going to recite 2 advanced spells at once, but Lloyd just silences him. An immense power begins to flow through him as Lloyd uses the Infernal Fireball and Waterbolt spell. Grim's panic reaches an all-time high as he realizes that Lloyd is weaving 2 incredibly advanced spells together. The mana is intensifying to incredible levels, and Lloyd couldn't be more excited to see what kind of power dual incantation brings. Lloyd realizes that he can't release the power on the ground, so he simply sends it into the sky. This still results in a display of power that can be seen from far away. In the castle, some servants wish that Albert wouldn't spend his time with Lloyd, since Lloyd is just a kid and he isn't very good at magic. Albert tells them that they are just blind. He reveals that Lloyd was able to graze all the targets perfectly in the exact same way. He did it on purpose, so Albert calls Lloyd a genius. Albert predicts that Lloyd could even become the Grand Sage, and hopes that he will be his ally. The servants are sure that he will be able to convince him, but Albert points out that he just wants to get along with his little brother. Albert predicts that Lloyd probably already knocked down all the targets, but the servants once again doubt Lloyd's ability. They think that knocking down the targets so fast would be impossible for the kid, and the servant wonders why it's so dark outside. We see why as Grim shakes in fear after seeing that Lloyd blew a hole right through the atmosphere. Lloyd panics as he doesn't want anyone to find out, but luckily things go back to normal. This was a pretty crazy event, so the terrified Grim once again wonders just who the heck Lloyd is. The next morning, Grim gets fed up with doing a bunch of maid duties for Lloyd. He calms down though, and reminds himself that he must make sure that Lloyd has a clean and healthy lifestyle in preparation for when he takes over his body. Later, the tear in the sky makes it into the newspaper, but no one knows what caused it. Lloyd might have some serious ADHD though, as he has already moved on. He is now more interested in a new story about high-ranking adventurers. They cleared a high-difficulty dungeon and returned with precious treasures and magical items. This sounds super fun to Lloyd, so he decides to go to a dungeon. Grimm points out that Lloyd will cause a mass panic if it's found out that he's gone, but Lloyd reveals that he has a solution. Grimm is then confused when Lloyd brings out an acorn. His confusion turns into amazement when Lloyd uses it to create a wooden replica of himself. It's actually a pretty complex replica, as Lloyd gave it nerves among other things. That way, it not only looks like him, but it can also do simple movements on its own. This still isn't enough, as Lloyd points out that he would have done this sooner if it was sure to work. Unfortunately, it is not, since the real problem is Silpha. A look back shows just how much she obsesses over Lloyd, as she noticed that he grew 1/4 of a millimeter taller. This silly dancing dummy he just created won't be enough to fool her, but Lloyd has a new solution for that too. He heads outside and we see that he left Grimm in control of the replica while still being able to communicate with him through his hand. The maids adore how cute he is, but Grimm thinks about how crazy Lloyd is. Lloyd transferred Grimm's soul into the replica and incorporated his soulless body into his hand. Lloyd leaves the rest to Grimm, and Grimm admires how real the replica feels. Soon he realizes that Lloyd isn't there to stop him, and he gets some devious ideas in his mind. Just then, Lloyd tells him that he really enjoys having Grimm as his familiar, and this brings tears to his eyes. Lloyd wonders if something is wrong, but Grimm just tells him to just hurry up and finish with the dungeon. Lloyd realizes that he doesn't know where to find a dungeon, and Grimm notices that it looks like someone is being attacked nearby. This isn't the case though, as the seemingly helpless girl turns on her pursuers, and she absolutely destroys them. She demonstrates her amazing fighting abilities, and Grimm points out that she must be a martial artist. Lloyd has read about the breathing technique she is using. It allows a person to put an energy called ki into their body, granting them extreme strength. The girl is able to spot them somehow, but that's okay with Lloyd since he wants to learn more about her technique. He begins to panic though, when Grimm points out that she might recognize him as the 7th prince. His silence makes the girls think that he is an enemy, so the guys panic as he makes her way to them. Luckily, Lloyd manages to change his appearance just in time, and introduces himself as Loberto. Lloyd used a spell that allows him to transform into someone he has seen before. He used the newly learned dual incantation to combine his appearance with Albert's to create an original look. The girl introduces herself as Tao, and Lloyd worries that she might suspect something since she isn't turning around. It turns out that Tao is actually panicking because she thinks Loberto is a hottie. Tao has spent all 18 years of her life training. She eventually escaped the dojo and became an adventurer in search of romance. Unfortunately for her, this hasn't worked out, since most guys prefer frail priestesses. Her time has finally come though, so she vows to make Loberto her boyfriend. She looks pretty busy, so Lloyd decides not to ask her to clear a dungeon with him, but she jumps at the chance. When they enter a dungeon, Tao is eager to show him her fighting prowess, but our boy Lloyd is too busy obsessing over some glowing rocks. Tao is impressed by how much Lloyd knows about her breathing technique, and she explains that learning about ki begins and ends with breathing. Proper breathing fills your whole body with ki, and it allows a person to release a burst of superhuman strength. The problem is that it takes a lot of training to even start sensing the ki in one's body. That is why Tao recommends that Loberto spend his time finding the ki to her heart instead. Lloyd completely ignores the corny joke, and he shocks Tao when he's able to use a breathing technique. He explains that he just copied her, but she warns that if he's not used to it, he will feel like his lungs are burning. Lloyd is just as crazy as always though, and just keeps doing the technique. He surprises himself when he's able to feel the energy inside of him, and becomes excited when he realizes that he will be able to apply this power to sorcery. Tao decides that she will help him learn about ki, and instructs him not to stop the breathing technique until they leave the dungeon. Back home, Grimm thinks Lloyd is crazy because he has such a comfortable life, but he doesn't care for it. All he cares about is learning more about sorcery. Things are going pretty smoothly for Grimm, but he is shocked when Silpha makes an appearance. Back in the dungeon, Tao shows Loberto a ki blast, and uses it to defeat the dungeon boss. They are rewarded with a chest, but Tao explains that a dungeon that hasn't grown much won't have any good loot. As they look at the chest, Tao is amazed to see that Roberto has already learned the key breathing technique in such a short period of time. Tao realizes that she just hit the jackpot. If she can manage to get Roberto into a student-teacher affair, then her caretaker will have no choice but to accept him as her fiancé. Tao goes to open the chest, but Lloyd must rescue her as it had a deadly trap. A lich emerges from the chest, and Lloyd wonders if this is the real boss of the dungeon. Tao acts like this lich isn't a big deal, so she tells Roberto to leave the dungeon while she takes care of it, but he would like to watch her fight. The situation is actually much worse than Tao is making it seem, so she apologizes to our boy and forces him out of the dungeon. She acknowledges that she might have broken a few of his bones, but that's better than him losing his life to the lich. Tao dodges the lich's attacks, but she thinks about how even A-ranked adventurers are no match for a lich. She isn't foolish enough to think that she can defeat it, so she decides to just buy enough time for Roberto to escape. Elsewhere, Lloyd is still flying from Tao launching him, but he's disappointed since there was a lot more he wanted to learn. Lloyd stops himself and wonders if he should go back. He is torn because he doesn't know why she sent him out of the dungeon, so he asks Grim for advice. Grim isn't responding, but when he does, he just tells Lloyd to come home and save him. Back at the fight, things aren't looking so good for Tao as she realizes that her life is about to end. She tries to back away, but she is shocked when the lich begins to speak. He explains that he eats the souls of adventurers to gain their wisdom and skills. He determines that Tao isn't worth eating because her key technique just boils down to low-level magic. However, he is interested in Lloyd because of how quickly he reacted to the trap. Tao points out that the lich and Roberto are nothing alike. Most people treat key techniques like a waste of time, but Roberto said he was impressed by it. The lich couldn't care less, so Tao attacks him. A barrier protects the lich, but Tao attacks it furiously while explaining that she has trained to use key techniques since she was 5 years old. Tao really shows just how angry she is, as she points out that she spent all her time training, so she never had the time to find a boyfriend. Her barrage of attacks ends with one final devastating blow, and she declares that all her frustration is why she shouldn't be messed with. Tao has used too much of her ki, so she can't even move an inch anymore, so things get really bad for her when the lich reveals that he is still alive. Tao used a full-power ki blast to destroy the barrier, but the lich reveals that it was pitiful. The full extent of her power is weaker than even just a single finger's worth of his magic. The lich adds insult to injury as he points out that she just wasted her life with all that training. He uses a spell to crush her with a magic shard, but the lich is shocked when Lloyd rescues her. Lloyd explains that he will be taking over, but he doesn't have much time, so he will have to end the fight quickly. Tao has no clue what's going on as she asks Roberto what he's doing there, but she sees that he has gotten very serious. Lloyd instantly flies behind the lich, and Tao is shocked to see him use the breathing technique. The lich is just as surprised, but it's because Lloyd used an air class spell called Full Sprint that should be impossible to do without an incantation. The lich attacks him, but he's in disbelief at how strong Lloyd's barrier is. Lloyd doesn't even seem interested in this monster, as he is really just focusing on perfecting the combination of ki and mana. He hasn't achieved it yet, but he remembers how Tao told him to focus. Lloyd takes in even more air into his lungs as he focuses, and he speeds up that full sprint spell. The lich thinks Lloyd is trying to get away, so he attacks him, but Lloyd is actually just breathing in more air. His barrier is getting in the way, so Lloyd just gets rid of it, but the lich thinks he was able to shatter it. The dumb lich thinks he has the upper hand, so he goes in for the final blow, but Lloyd dodges it all. Tao is shocked as she realizes that the lich's attack didn't break the barrier. Roberto did it himself, so he could draw in even more air to use an even more powerful ki technique. Lloyd continues to dodge attacks while also molding together his ki and mana. Lloyd shocks everyone watching when he uses this new power, but Lloyd isn't satisfied with it. He makes a slight adjustment and laughs like a maniac as he unleashes a barrage of attacks on the lich. The psychopath demands that the lich not give up since he is having fun and there's a lot more stuff he wants to try out. The lich can't comprehend what's going on as he thought that Lloyd was just a mage. The kid isn't using any incantations though, and Lloyd's simple ki techniques are somehow matching the lich's sorcery. The lich takes some damage and realizes that Lloyd's techniques are actually overpowering him. Lloyd sharpens his attack even more, so the lich prepares to defend against it with the barrier, but it's no use. The attack slices right through the barrier and the lich, so Tao watches in amazement as Lloyd declares that he was able to figure it out. Afterwards, Tao is disappointed to see that they just got some old dagger for all their hard work, but Lloyd can tell that it's been bathed in mana. She still doesn't think that it's that great, so she lets Lloyd have it. Just then, Lloyd is startled when the ground begins to collapse, but Tao explains that dungeons fall apart after the boss is defeated and the treasure is taken. Lloyd is amazed as he thinks it's like a survival technique used by lizards who sacrifice their tails so they can survive. He realizes that the dungeons lie dormant in the ground until someone drops a magic item. The dungeon absorbs the item and slowly builds an actual dungeon around it. It then collects gear left by those that failed to clear it. Then when it senses that it's about to be cleared, it offers up one of the items it collected so it can survive. It's all so fascinating to him, but they're running out of time. Lloyd manages to pull the chest from the ground, and they escape just before the dungeon collapses. Lloyd marvels at the closed dungeon as it gathers its strength underground until it's able to become a dungeon again. Tao acknowledges that Loberto is an amazing mage, but she wonders why he chose to use a key technique at the end of the battle. She questions if it was for her sake, since the lich was mocking her. Unfortunately for her, Lloyd reveals that he just used it for fun. Just then, Lloyd prepares to leave as he remembers that he needs to rush home. Tao thinks about how the key technique Lloyd used is so advanced that she can't even use it, so she declares that she will train hard to become a fascinating girl for the next time they meet. Lloyd says that he will train hard too as he leaves, and Tao hopes to become the kind of girl who can catch his attention. Just then, she remembers that she doesn't know how to contact him, but it's too late. Lloyd arrives home shocked to see Grim in bad shape. Silpha took the fake Lloyd for training, but she was startled by how weak he had become, so she vowed to make him strong again. Grim now sobs as he didn't stand a chance at making it through the training. Grim is disappointed to see that Lloyd spent so much time away just for a crappy sword, but Lloyd explains that it's actually quite the treasure. He puts it in some hot water and scrapes it to reveal that it really was treated with mana essence. Mana essence is hard to come by, and enchantment spells are difficult to do. Mana essence is used to write magic formulas onto a weapon in order to strengthen it. However, if it fails, then both the essence and the weapon are wasted. Since mana essence is so hard to find, Lloyd decides to analyze the ones he scraped out the knife so they can make some themselves. He uses a purification spell to reveal its components, which end up being oil, silver, and something called hematite. Hematite is made from powdering a monster's core, so it's pretty rare, but they can make some from the dungeon chest. All that's left is oil and silver. Lloyd's father gives him some silver coins, and he wonders what his son will buy with it. Lloyd and Grim then head to their hideout, where they melt the silver. Afterwards, Lloyd makes a bet with Silpha. If he manages to land an attack on her, then she will give him oil. Lloyd surprises her with some magic, and prepares to win the bet, but he loses track of her. Silpha reveals herself and wins the fight. She kindly still gives him the oil, since she is just glad that he isn't as weak as the other day. Grim spies on them, so he is insulted because that was actually him that she is calling weak. She shouldn't have been able to beat him even if he wasn't using magic, so he wonders just what kind of mage she is. Silpha then admires just how impressive Lloyd is at just 10 years old. He excels with the sword and with magic, so she predicts that he could become Knight Commander when he grows up. Lloyd just thanks her for the oil, and she wonders what he plans to cook with it. Lloyd and Grim head back to their hideout to add the oil to their concoction, and they finish making the mana essence. Next up, he asks Albert for some weapons so he can test his enhancement magic. Albert thinks it's adorable how much Lloyd loves magic, so he asks his troops which one of them wants his adorable little brother to strengthen their weapon. They all eagerly offer their swords, but they only do it because Albert practically ordered them to. In reality, they're not too excited about it, since enchantment is so difficult that it rarely goes well. Even worse, Lloyd is just 10 years old, so the guys assume that he will just end up breaking all their weapons. Grim listens to how much they are doubting Lloyd, and he gets really upset. We then watch as Grim assists Lloyd, and angrily declares that they're going to enchant the heck out of the weapons and make them unstoppable. Lloyd then uses what they made to write the enchantment called Boost Power. Lloyd acts like a mad scientist, and Grim is shocked as Lloyd is applying 3 layers of boost power. This kid is a lunatic, as he's filling every tiny spot he can find with spell formulas. Of course, the sword breaks as the steel it's made from couldn't withstand the spells he was adding to it. Lloyd realizes that enchanting is really hard, but Grimm encourages him to keep trying. After several failures, Lloyd finally manages to get the hang of it. Afterwards, Lloyd returns to Albert with 50 of the 120 swords he was given. He apologizes for breaking 70 of them, but in reality he thinks about how he actually succeeded in enchanting 80 of them. The problem was that he tried to add even more spells to a few and ended up destroying them. Albert is in absolute disbelief, since even a first-rate enchanter only has a success rate of around 10%. It's so unbelievable that the troops don't think he was able to enchant the weapons at all. They just assume that he quit after ruining 70 weapons and is now returning the rest unenchanted. The soldiers decide to lie and say that the swords feel sharper, but one is surprised when his sheath gets sliced in half by his sword. They don't really know what to make of it, but the angry little Grimm feels vindicated. Albert is amazed by one of the more impressive swords, and Lloyd explains that he was hoping to see them use the weapons in battle. This is actually perfect timing, as Albert reveals that they are going on a monster hunt. Soon after, we see that Lloyd is accompanying Albert. Lloyd of course has Grimm with him, and they arrive at the forest where they will have their monster hunt. The monster isn't in the woods though, it is by a nearby lake. Lloyd is extremely excited since it's not often that he's allowed to leave the castle, and he also really wants to see his enchanted swords in action. Albert points out how Silpha never leaves Lloyd's side, and she thanks him for allowing her to come with. Albert says it was only right since Silpha is Lloyd's teacher and bodyguard. He teases her by implying that her feelings for Lloyd might be too strong, but Silpha silences him with a threat. Just then, they are surrounded by kobolds, but the soldiers consider this to be a warm-up for the monster. Lloyd pretends to be scared, but Grimm knows that Lloyd sensed the threat a long time ago. One of the key techniques Tao taught him is called spectral detection. By using key breathing, Lloyd is now able to sense his surroundings at all times. Grimm watches his master and thinks about how Lloyd always has spectral detection and his barrier active. Surprising him is impossible, so Grimm states that Lloyd gets scarier with every passing day. The fight begins and everyone involved is shocked by how sharp the swords are. It's not just slicing through the monsters, it's cutting through steel equipment like it's butter. Soldiers are freaking out like children with their hands on a knife for the first time, so Lloyd decides that his enchantments were a success. Albert thinks so as well, and he tells everyone that his little brother is an enchanting prodigy. Silpha agrees as she stands over a pile of monster corpses, but Lloyd points out that he didn't even enchant her sword. Just then, one kobold tries to attack Lloyd, but Tao appears out of nowhere to take it out. Lloyd almost messes up by calling out to her like he's still Roberto, but he stops himself just in time. Tao noticed that Lloyd was using key breathing techniques, but she came because she thought she sensed Roberto. Upon closer look, she also sees a lot of resemblance between Roberto and Lloyd. Just then, Silpha eliminates another monster. She commends Tao for her assistance, but threatens her not to be so forward with Prince Lloyd. Tao points out that she sensed that monster coming, and key techniques are not to be underestimated. Tensions rise between these two, so Albert calms them down and invites Tao to join them. That night, Tao is shocked to learn that Albert is a prince. Albert looks like Roberto too, but not as much as Lloyd, who she is looking for now. Lloyd hides nearby and realizes that Tao's proficiency with Ki has made her really sensitive to it. He was using spectral detection, and that must be how she found him. Lloyd decides to hide in his tent, but for some reason Silpha was in there changing. Lloyd says that he doesn't need her to protect him, but Silpha disagrees as she doesn't like how the new girl is chasing after him. Tao barges in on them, so Silpha calls her an idiot, and Tao calls Silpha a perverted maid. The two argue, so Lloyd uses this moment to get away. Albert calls Lloyd a lady killer, and points out that Silpha has changed a lot since she started looking after Lloyd. She sees a lot of maturity in Lloyd, but Albert warns that relationships with women can be complicated. Just then, the girls notice that the soldiers are watching them a little too closely. They knock them all out, so Lloyd hears Albert's message loud and clear. Tao explains that she was hired to clean up an old shrine, so Silpha tells her to hurry along. They almost start arguing again, but Albert interrupts and says that Tao's ability to sense danger is very helpful. He would like for her to act as a lookout for them overnight, but she points out that they won't need one, as the monster has arrived. The monster is a bear wolf, so Silpha tells Lloyd to stay behind her. The monster begins attacking, and Lloyd points out how bear wolves are incredibly fast for how large they are. Lloyd tries talking to Grim, but the little guy is distracted as he seems to recognize the shrine. Tao manages to save some soldiers, but this monster is really tough. Albert has had enough, so he draws his sword. He apologizes to the wolf, but explains that local villagers are suffering because of it. Albert uses his sword while reciting an incantation, and he releases an incredibly powerful attack that destroys the monster. Everyone is amazed that he took it out with just one attack, but Albert points out that his attack is not normally that powerful. It was only possible because of the enchantment that Lloyd applied to his spellbound sword. Lloyd thinks about how he added a little extra to Albert's sword, but Grim isn't even paying attention. He is extremely worried and reveals that there is a demon sealed in the shrine nearby. Just then, everyone is shocked as the bear wolf is somehow still able to move. Other monsters appear out of nowhere, and a voice begins speaking to our group. It is upset that they harmed one of his minions. The voice reveals itself from within the bear wolf and introduces himself as the demon Pazuzu. He vows that they will pay with their lives, and he sends his minions to attack. They are easy enough to slice up, but the problem is that they can instantly heal. Tao rescues Albert, and he has determined that the demon is controlling all the minions. Lloyd wonders if this demon is an acquaintance of Grim's, but it's not. Grim explains that Pazuzu is able to transmute his mana in order to control the monsters. This makes the monsters think that he is their master, but in reality his mana just acts like strings to control them as puppets. He can also supply mana through the strings, which is why the monsters are able to regenerate. Grim very seriously declares that things will get bad if Pazuzu is not taken down. However, Lloyd doesn't really care, and just wants Grim to teach him mana transmutation. Silpha wishes Tao would hurry up and do something, but Tao points out that Silpha isn't doing anything. Grim tells Lloyd that this isn't the best time to try and learn something, since the others are really fighting for their lives. Lloyd is sure that they will be fine though, and insists that Grim teach him. As Pazuzu watches the fight, he points out while some of his opponents have skill, most of them are only surviving because of their weapons. Pazuzu then begins to insult Lloyd by saying that he ran away like a scared baby. Silpha is clearly not liking what he is saying, so he tells her that it must be a lot of work for her to look after a pathetic waste of flesh like Lloyd. This clearly pushes Silpha over the edge, and Tao is terrified of her when she notices. Silpha excuses herself from Lloyd's side, but he doesn't care as he's still busy learning stuff. Pazuzu keeps trash talking, but Silpha starts firing back. She says that all the minions smell really bad, and the only thing worse is Pazuzu's breath. She has decided that Pazuzu's interfering with Lloyd's fresh air, so she must end his life. Silpha casually draws her sword, but Pazuzu explains that they have no chance of leaving alive. He is supplying the minions with mana, so they will continue to regenerate with no end. Demons have no shortage of mana, so he won't run out either. Pazuzu thinks that he made Silpha cry, but she once again says that it's his breath. Just then, Albert gets worried when the demon attacks her, but she is more than okay because she cut off all the monster's feet. She suggests that he leave the furball he's controlling behind, and warns that he will lose faster if he doesn't. Just then, everyone notices that the minions have stopped moving, and they are regenerating slower. This is because the demon is focused on regenerating its own bearwolf. They might have a chance to win whenever the demon does this, so Albert tells Silpha to keep injuring him. She prepares to do so, but Pazuzu thinks they are just foolish. Nearby, Grim finishes giving his lesson to Lloyd. He explains that Pazuzu must have a serious knack for mana transmutation, since it's not easy to do, even for a powerful demon. Grim tries to give a demonstration on mana control, and explains that a good place to start is by adding color to it. After that comes shaping and adding sense. Grim even struggles with it, but he is shocked when Lloyd reveals that he shaped his mana into a flower and even added a scent. Grim can't believe that he made it so perfectly already, and they both take a moment to enjoy the smell. Meanwhile, Pazuzu's in great distress as Silpha's giving him a beatdown. He can't figure out how she leaves no openings, and he wonders how someone like her could be a mere babysitter. Silpha borrows one of the soldier's swords and admires it because it was enchanted by Lloyd. Her obsession with Lloyd has made Pazuzu become interested in him, so he declares that he wants to dissect him. The demon shows off his immense speed, but he continues to insult Lloyd, which just makes Silpha even angrier. The demon consumes her and mocks her for being a stupid human that fell for his provocation. He is stunned though when Silpha is still alive, and she slices the wolf bear's body in half. She declares that this is her family's dual blade art and follows it up with another called Diving Sparrow. This slices the monster's head right off, so Pazuzu tries to point out that she is just a maid. Unfortunately for him, this isn't true, so Silpha uses another art to completely destroy the wolf and expose the demon. Everyone is absolutely stunned by her power, and Lloyd realizes that this is what Silpha looks like when she gets serious. He admires her and memorizes this moment by shaping his mana into her. Silpha is sickened by the thought of the demon trying to hurt Lloyd, so she declares that the only thing he is fit to touch is her blade. Silpha tells the demon to make his peace, but she is shocked when he begins to do something. The others finish off the minions, but Albert knows that it's not over, and they need to give backup to Silpha. Just then, everyone collapses because of the demon's miasma, including Silpha. Pazuzu is furious since he has been building up those puppets for over a century. He blames Silpha for ruining his plan, and his attack sends her into the river. Albert wants to help her, but his strength is being depleted. Pazuzu reveals that this is his miasma of domination, and all those who inhale it fall into his clutches. Silpha points out that this must be why it smells so bad, so Pazuzu gets upset that she never stops the insults. His attack meant for Silpha is blocked by Tao. Silpha tries to tell her that she is fine, but this is clearly not the case. Silpha tries to remain brave as she tells Tao to run, but she's just too injured, and she collapses. Pazuzu is actually very impressed by her, since she took more of his miasma than anyone else, and she was still able to defy him so fiercely. Even the monsters he controlled fell into his power in under 30 seconds. Pazuzu was most intrigued, however, by how Tao isn't under his control. Tao pushes him back, but he just ends up capturing her. Pazuzu assumes that she's using some kind of breathing technique to withstand his miasma. He is correct, but things get bad for Tao when her breathing is interrupted. Pazuzu points out that she could have just run away, but this weirdo assumes that she stayed because she wanted to become his minion. Tao pushes the demon away again and states that there is a hottie that she's waiting for. She is done messing around, so this time she uses an incredibly powerful attack. She realizes that she got a little too heated and used a big move. Tao tries to focus on steadying her breathing before the demon counterattacks, but she has even worse problems as she is attacked by one of the puppets. She is shocked that they have already regenerated, and the demon wonders who this hottie is that she was talking about. Pazuzu gets tired of all the talking, so he uses his maximum domination miasma. He figures she will surely be under his control now, but Tao had just realized something. The hottie she has been talking about is a lot closer than she thought. She can still sense him through all of Pazuzu's miasma, and it's giving her hope. Pazuzu still has no clue who she is talking about, so Tao reveals that the hottest guy is coming to destroy him. Unfortunately for her, her time is up, and the puppet monster consumes her. Pazuzu then turns his attention to Silpha, as she will make a great addition to his minions. He knows that getting her under his control will be difficult, but her strength justifies the cost. Pazuzu plans to use tons of miasma on her, and Lloyd realizes that that must have been how he was able to control the bear wolves. Pazuzu is pleased with himself as he reveals that he eliminated their parents and used his miasma to replace them in the minds of the pups. Pazuzu compliments himself as he declares that no one can defy his domination. Lloyd calmly says that Pazuzu was awful, so Pazuzu is shocked when he finally realizes that Lloyd is somehow able to move around in his miasma. He demands to know how this is possible, but Lloyd doesn't even know. Him not knowing is even more shocking, but Pazuzu is left in disbelief again when he realizes that Grimm is a demon. He can't understand why a demon would be protecting a human, and Pazuzu insults Grimm for looking so cute. Pazuzu calls him a shame to demonkind, but Grimm still tries to give Pazuzu some advice as a fellow demon. Grimm stops himself though, as all the insults just make him want to see Pazuzu get torn to pieces. Pazuzu sends his terrifying demons to attack, but Lloyd is just excited about testing out his newly learned mana transmutation ability. There are a ton of monsters though, so Grimm tells Lloyd that he will have to put out a decent chunk of his mana. Lloyd decides on what the right amount is, and Grimm is amazed since he has always had a hard time adjusting his own mana output. Lloyd visualizes something gentle and warm, so Pazuzu is shocked when Lloyd easily takes away his influence over the bear wolves. Grimm calls them all pushovers, but Lloyd points out that he might have fallen under his mana's influence as well. Lloyd has one of the bear wolves spit out Tao, and he's glad to see that she is okay. Pazuzu is still in disbelief because of how Lloyd was able to convert all his mana into a field of flowers in an instant, and he assumes that Lloyd must be an amazing sorcerer. Pazuzu tries to control his minions again, but Grim points out that it's too late. The Bearwolves have already remembered their pride as monsters, and the fact that Pazuzu eliminated their parents. The angry Bearwolves attack Pazuzu, and Lloyd is amazed to see how they attack in a pack. They are extremely powerful this way, and puppets could never recreate this kind of attack. Pazuzu shows that he's still a powerful demon, and punishes the Bearwolves for attacking him. He doesn't regret eliminating their parents, and he insults them by calling them mangy mutts. Pazuzu's real upset now, and points out that this is what happens when someone tries to defy him. He explains that it doesn't matter what kind of spells Lloyd uses, they will be ineffective against a demon. Lloyd remembers that Grim said the same thing. He said demons can't be eliminated by magic, so Grim explains that it just has never happened before. Pazuzu then declares that he will show them his true power now that he isn't supplying the minions with mana. Lloyd isn't even listening to him, as he is now just fascinated by why magic can eliminate demons. He assumes that demons are just really difficult to eliminate completely, but this just gets this crazy kid even more excited to find out what it would take. Pazuzu is then absolutely horrified by the dark power that emanates from Lloyd's body, and Grim points out that this is why Pazuzu's mana never had an effect on Lloyd. Lloyd decided one day to hide his power to avoid unwanted attention, and keeping it restrained all the time is actually a lot of work. Grim explains to Pazuzu that his mana was never going to be enough to even touch Lloyd. Pazuzu and Grim are both demons, but there's nothing they could ever do with their mana that would come close to comparing to Lloyd's power. Lloyd is a little psycho as always, as he's really happy that he has a demon to test out all the spells he has been wanting to try. Demons supposedly can't be eliminated by magic, so Lloyd can cut loose without any restraint. Pazuzu trembles in fear as he can only wonder how Lloyd has such an absurd amount of mana. He wonders if he's having some kind of terrifying nightmare, and he is shocked when Lloyd tries to put a barrier around him. Things get really terrifying for him when he realizes that this is not a fight for Lloyd. Lloyd just sees him as a test subject, and he is trying to put him in a cage. Pazuzu tries to run away, and Grim doesn't blame him since he would do the same thing. Lloyd is having a lot of fun unleashing just some of his power, but Pazuzu's running for his life while avoiding being captured in the barriers Lloyd is putting up. Pazuzu is just barely getting away, so he begs Lloyd to stop. Grim watches in amazement and wonders just how many spells he can cast at once. Lloyd explains that he can cast around 20, but he teams up with Grim to cast even more. Life gets a lot more difficult for Pazuzu, as he must now dodge even more barriers, and he wonders how Lloyd could possibly be chanting so quickly. Pazuzu compliments himself for being able to dodge this much, but that is short-lived, as Lloyd uses a spatial spell called Dimensional Enclosure. Lloyd points out that he has him now, so Pazuzu tells the psychotic sorcerer to let him go. Lloyd refuses and points out that Pazuzu has done terrible things to the Bearwolves. Not only did he eliminate their parents, it's clear that Pazuzu did a lot of chimera experiments on them. Pazuzu demands that he be set free, as he is the demon meant to rule the entire world. This doesn't work, so Pazuzu offers to raise Lloyd's standing when he takes over the world. That doesn't work either, so he begs Lloyd to calm down. He has never been hit with magic from someone as powerful as Lloyd, so he fears that he might actually die. Lloyd stopped listening to this guy a long time ago, as he's just now reciting a crazy incantation. Pazuzu continues to beg for his life, but it's too late as the magic is already in motion. Lloyd estimates that he is currently activating 240 spells per minute. Lloyd is amazed by how beautiful it looks, so he decides to continue doing this for another 30 whole minutes. However, not even just 5 minutes later, Lloyd fears that the demon might already be dead. Grim clarifies that sorcery affects demons, sort of like how unpleasant sounds and lights affect humans. However, the sheer overwhelming amount of magic Lloyd used on Pazuzu has done him some serious damage. Pazuzu is now falling apart and thinks about how he spent an entire century raising those monsters. He was supposed to rule the world, but it was all put to an end by a kid who wanted to do an experiment on him. Lloyd is already pretty disinterested, which just adds insult to Pazuzu's injury. Just then, Lloyd is shocked to see that everyone is already waking up. He can't let anyone find out about its incredible power, so he runs off to think of an excuse. Grim tells Pazuzu that he has realized that people don't want leaders that gripe about how hard they have it. They are more likely to have a good time with someone who is enjoying themselves. Lloyd is always doing what he likes to do when he wants to do it, so this is probably why people are always flocking to him. Grim remembers to keep his tough guy act and explains that he isn't like the ones flocking to Lloyd. He is just gathering his strength so he can get his revenge on Lloyd one day. In this case, Pazuzu decides to entrust his ambition of world domination to Grim. Grim accepts and is glad to see that Pazuzu's mana has restored him a bit. Lloyd has come up with an excuse and tells everyone that some guy named Loberto showed up to defeat the demon and save all of them. Tao overhears this and wonders where he is. Everyone in town celebrates the return of the victorious Prince Albert. They think Lloyd is a cute kid, but he doesn't compare to the great Albert, so this just gets Silpha upset. The king is pleased with Albert and wonders where the two adventurers that helped him are. Albert explains that Loberto was actually never seen, but we get a look back to see what happened to Tao. She became suspicious when she realized that she was wearing Lloyd's poncho, so Lloyd just tricked her into leaving by saying that Loberto was nearby. The king is very interested in this Loberto person, but Albert shockingly explains that Lloyd contributed the most to the hunt. They were only able to survive because of Lloyd's enchanted weapons, so Albert thinks that Lloyd should be considered part of the royal succession. Everyone in the room can't believe this, as Albert thinks that Lloyd would make a great fit for the throne. The king points out that this would just create another rival for Albert, but Albert thinks that the throne should be given to whoever is most worthy, even if it's not him. He questions any decision that would exclude Lloyd just because of his youth. Albert makes it clear, however, that he does not intend to be outdone. The king is excited by this great turn of events and asks Lloyd if he will join the struggle. He wants to know if Lloyd will stand beside his brothers in pursuit of the throne. Everyone is in awe of this grand moment, but Lloyd just calmly declines. Outside, the little dweeb runs around like the kid that he is, and he explains that one of the bear wolves followed them home. Lloyd thinks it's really cute and fluffy, so Grim gets jealous about not getting the same reaction. Grim fluffs himself up and casually interjects into the conversation. Silpha arrives to see how much the bear wolf likes Lloyd, and Lloyd hides Grim inside its fur. Lloyd has named it Shiro, and he wants to teach it a bunch of stuff. Silpha explains that complex commands tend to be the domain of monster tamers, so Lloyd considers using mana to control the monsters just like they do. Grim is amazed by Lloyd since he turned down a chance at the throne so casually. Lloyd always just cares about magic, and he is a true magic maniac. The king watches nearby and thinks that Lloyd rejected the offer because he is so modest. Albert doesn't think this is the reason though, as he believes that kingship is simply just too minor of a role for Lloyd. The king agrees and is excited to see what Lloyd's future holds. Later we find that Lloyd has taught his wolf simple commands. Shiro learns those easily, but complex commands are more difficult. Lloyd tried writing a command spell into his mana, but this just confused the poor animal. They decide to speak with a monster expert and head out to see Princess Elise in her garden tower. Grim is amazed by all the monsters there, and Lloyd explains that Elise is his sister and the 6th princess of Salem. She is an animal lover, and that doesn't just mean cats and dogs. This includes all animals and even monsters. Just then, Elise appears out of nowhere to show Lloyd a lot of affection, but it's too much for Lloyd and he passes out. Elise gets scolded by her maid named Ares, but she explains that she just can't help herself. Lloyd is impressed when Elise can tell that Shiro is a bear wolf, but she seems kind of crazy, and Silpha begins to doubt if she will be able to help them. Lloyd wants to give her a chance, so he asks to see one of her monsters. He is then shocked when she reveals that she already called one. It's a lesser class Fenrir named Liru, and Grim is shocked since it's a higher level bear wolf. Lloyd can't believe that this monster was able to slip past his presence detection, but what's even more shocking is that Lloyd has no clue when Elise issued the command. The Fenrir knew to sneak up behind them, and it even took Silpha's headband. Clearly Elise gave it some complex orders, and she did it without even showing any indication. This excites Lloyd greatly, so he begs Elise to teach him how to speak to Shiro. Elise confidently explains that it won't be easy, but Lloyd prefers when things aren't simple. Elise agrees to teach him, but she shocks everyone when she reveals that the key to speaking to animals is love. She declares that love will help him understand any monster, and this is demonstrated when the animals in her tower go to hug her. Ares thinks it's pointless to try and learn from Elise since she is simply a prodigy, but Elise declares that anyone can learn. Elise gives another demonstration, but this time the animals go a bit overboard with everyone. Silpha is shocked to see that Lloyd seems to be taking an interest in love, and she imagines Lloyd asking her to teach him more. In reality though, Lloyd just realized that he was trying to issue orders to Shiro, but his sister wasn't giving her animals any commands. Instead, she was just sharing her will. When she spoke to them, Lloyd noticed that her mana was not coming out of her hands. Instead, it was flowing directly from her head to theirs. This means that she is able to subconsciously connect to animals with mana, giving them a direct vision of what she wants. Lloyd determines that instead of issuing orders, he will try to share a mental image of his will. Lloyd does just that, and everyone is amazed when Shiro does the trick that Lloyd was trying to teach him. Lloyd celebrates with Shiro, and Ares determines that he must be really gifted. The technique he used is exactly how monster tamers share their will. Sylpha is also impressed, but a bit disappointed that it didn't go how she thought it would. Elise is upset as she points out that it's supposed to be love, not complicated sharing will stuff. Lloyd explains that love actually plays a huge role in the technique. He goes even more in depth, which just makes everyone fall in love with him. Lloyd is glad that he finally figured out how to connect with monsters, and Sylpha declares that it's time he put that much effort into his sword training. Luckily for Lloyd, Albert appears as he needs to speak with the boy. The two argue about who will take Lloyd, and Albert explains that he wants to introduce him to someone. It's Lloyd's older brother, the fourth prince named Dion. Dion heard that Lloyd enchanted Albert's sword, but he shocks them when he explains that he finds that very hard to believe. For this reason, he has decided to find out if Lloyd is just full of it. Albert gives a little history about how Dion studied smithing abroad, which is why he's interested in enchanting. Dion has had enough of the chit-chat though, and he explains that he has everything ready to test Lloyd's enchanting ability. As Lloyd begins the process, Dion very much doubts that he will succeed. Enchantments are an advanced enough skill as it is, but Lloyd applying one to a spellbound sword like Albert's is just insane. That's beyond even what they could manage abroad. Dion predicts that he will have to teach Lloyd a lesson for lying, but he's absolutely stunned when Lloyd is finished. Albert doesn't blame Dion for his reaction, since even an amateur can tell that Lloyd's technique is completely unique. Dion is speechless as he can only wonder what kind of spell engraving Lloyd came up with. It has reinforced strength, reinforced elasticity, self-cleaning, and even self-repair. Dion's skepticism immediately turns to excitement as he realizes that Lloyd might be able to help him achieve his greatest dream. The dream to create the ultimate spellbound sword. Weapons enchanted the normal way just can't compare to what he has in mind. Dion wants them to engrave the spell onto the weapon while forging the steel. This will allow them to apply more advanced magic than normally possible. They will be able to create a super weapon that's only possible from an enchanter and smith working together. Dion reveals that he was always really into sorcery growing up, but it didn't work out because he had no talent for it. However, spellbound swords are awesome because anyone can swing one, and they can do cool magical type stuff. His goal is to turn their country into one where everyone can use magic by wielding spellbound swords. Lloyd doesn't care too much about any of that, but he's very interested in the production process. Lloyd agrees to help, so Dion explains that he wants to make a sword that shoots fire when it's swung. To do this, Lloyd recommends that they use the enchantment called Pyrolance Insinis. The problem is that its casting formula requires 14 parts, and a spellbound sword can only hold a max of 5. Lloyd's solution to this is to compress that formula into 2 parts. Lloyd compresses it and prepares to apply it to the steel that Dion is forging. The two of them are shocked though when just the application shatters the steel. Lloyd tries to brainstorm some solutions, but the steel keeps breaking. Lloyd feels bad after wasting so much mana essence, but he can't figure out what's wrong. Just then, Grim notices something about the mana essence and brings it to Lloyd's attention. Dion encourages Lloyd to keep trying since he got a ton of mana essence for cheap anyway. Lloyd purifies the mana essence to find that it barely has any hematite in it. Enchanting spellbound swords requires a much higher concentration of hematite, but this stuff is made from monster cores and it's pretty rare. Dion doesn't have any, so Lloyd figures he will have to sneak out to hunt monsters in a dungeon again. Just then, Sylpha comes up with the idea herself for them to go to a dungeon. Lloyd points out that a prince like him isn't allowed, but Sylpha explains that the king changed his mind after the monster hunt incident. He now thinks that Lloyd should broaden his horizons by seeing the wider world. To start this journey, they head to the Adventurers Guild so Lloyd can register as an adventurer. The receptionist is Katarina, and she has Lloyd fill out some paperwork before touching a crystal ball that will gauge his strength and set his adventure rank. Lloyd is familiar with crystal balls to measure ability, since he used one when he enrolled at the Magic Academy in his past life. However, these are under much different circumstances. Lloyd is sure that it will explode if he uses his full power, and that would draw too much attention. To avoid this, Lloyd focuses really hard on suppressing his mana, even more than usual. He just keeps shrinking it down to the level of a flea. When he eventually touches the crystal ball, he gets laughed at for receiving an overall rating of E. Katarina isn't laughing though, as she is shocked to see that Lloyd's magic rating is an A. That's comparable to an experienced sorcerer, which disappoints Lloyd since he thought he compressed his mana down to 1%. Katarina then declares that Lloyd is the most promising new adventurer since the one known as the Silver Blader. The other adventurers get furious though to hear her compare the two. The legendary Silver Blader tore through countless dungeons like a demon, but suddenly disappeared. They think that a legend like her should never be mentioned in the same breath as an E-rank nobody. Silpha explains that they want a dungeon quest, but those require at least a single B-ranked adventurer to be involved. Silpha decides to re-register, but one of the guys thinks that she should just go with him. After Silpha teaches him a lesson, Katarina tells him that he hit on the wrong person, as Silpha is actually the legendary Silver Blader. She explains that re-registering involves a 2-level demotion to C rank, so that won't work. Just then, Tao arrives willing to help out. Silpha doesn't even acknowledge her though, and declares that they will just head home. Tao insists on helping, and explains that she went from dungeon to dungeon searching for Loberto. Visiting all the dungeons caused her to get strong enough to be A-ranked. Tao now offers her assistance in exchange for getting her a date with Albert. Katarina recommends a dungeon quest, while Silpha takes Lloyd's cloak back. Lloyd is amazed by Silpha's legendary past, and she explains that it was from when she was very young. What she remembers most was her failed attempt at bringing down some deadly foes. They are called the Assassin's Guild. This trio then makes their way through a dungeon, and they find a chest. Back at the forge, Albert goes to see Dion. Dion explains that it will take Lloyd a couple more days to bring the materials they need, but Albert seems concerned by how long it will take. This makes Dion realize that a war is approaching, so he tells Albert to just wait a little longer. Once Lloyd returns, they will be able to mass-produce spellbound swords to use in battle. Albert explains that they shouldn't worry about fighting, since he just brought them together so they could get along as brothers again. Albert hopes that one day their weapons will help protect the kingdom, so he encourages them to keep trying. Just then, Dion explains that they should come soon, as Lloyd has returned with the monster core. As they make the sword, Dion has come to realize that Lloyd is an amazing kid. Albert is already aware, as he believes that there's nothing the kid can't do. This is proving even further when Dion tests out the spellbound sword they made, and it causes the Magicless Dion to do massive destruction. Lloyd realizes that he might have went a bit overboard with the sword, so he will have to tone it down in the future. The sword produced by the brothers is then named D-Lord. That night, Lloyd gets some much needed rest. He realizes that Albert has been really busy, so he wonders if something big is coming. Just then, Lloyd senses something in the garden. It's a very strange feeling, almost as if there's a hole in space. Shiro is really perceptive, but he hasn't noticed either. Lloyd wonders what it could be, and we see a mysterious person outside. Thanks for watching my recap. Sign up to my free newsletter if you want to show some support to the channel. Link is in the description.